Good evening, and welcome to Eerie Echoes. Tonight, we descend into the misty peaks of the Appalachian Mountains, lands where every stone holds a story and every shadow hides a secret. These are not just legends, but true fears, lived and told by real witnesses. Turn off the lights, and remember, the mountains never forget, and they never forgive. I pushed the barn door open. The hinges groaned, not like old metal, but like the muffled cry of something alive. For just a second, I thought I heard breathing on the other side, a slow, steady inhale. Then nothing. A wave of heat rolled out toward me, heavy, dry, suffocating. Not the kind of warmth you'd expect, more like the breath of an oven, and right there, in the center of the dusty wooden floor, my eyes locked on it. A perfect circle made of black ash, jagged lines cutting through it like a web. But it wasn't just a drawing. The ash was warm, as if someone had been here moments ago. I should have left, but my hand was already lifting the camera. Ashwood, West Virginia. The kind of place you can barely find on a map. One gas station, 2 diners, a church that's been closed for 20 years. But this town lives on whispers, and those whispers lead here, to the barn where, in 1974, 3 teenagers vanished. Their bodies were never found. The police wrote only one thing in the report: satanic symbols on the floor. Since then, no one has stepped inside. At least, that's what they believe. My boots crunched over broken glass. The air was stale, thick with mold. But beneath it, there was something metallic, sharp, like the smell of blood. Faint daylight leaked through cracks in the walls, slicing the darkness into narrow beams. And in one of those pale shafts of light, I saw movement in the ash circle. Small, quick, real. The central line trembled. And then came the whisper, "Stay." I thought it was the wind. But the wind had stopped. I raised the camera, pressed the shutter. The flash lit up the barn for an instant. And in that instant, I saw the ash shift, not scatter, move, like it was breathing. My eyes drifted to the walls. Every inch of them was covered in symbols, some in white chalk, some in charcoal, and some deep red, faded to brown. They felt old, older than the barn itself. Like they were watching me. In the far corner, a small wooden door, no higher than my knee. The same strange symbols painted around its frame. From the crack beneath it, a faint, flickering light. As I stepped closer, the glow strengthened. Then, just for a second, a small shadow slid past the gap. It moved away from the light, into the darkness behind it, like there was something else back there. My hand reached for the handle. The light went out. Then came the sound, slow, deliberate, scratching, from the other side of the wood. I turned toward the exit, but my boot brushed against the edge of the ash circle. A deep, low vibration rose from beneath the floor. I froze. I raised the camera again, glanced at the screen, and my stomach dropped. In the photo, behind me, a tall, thin figure stood in the corner. No face, just 2 black hollows where eyes should have been. I spun around. The corner was empty. And then, a cold breath brushed the back of my neck, sharp, damp, too close. I turned, nothing. The whisper came again. "Finish it." I looked down. One of the lines in the circle was broken, and in my hand was a piece of chalk. I didn't remember picking it up. My fingers moved on their own, dragging the chalk across the floor, sealing the gap. The moment the line closed, every candle in the barn burst into flame. I hadn't even noticed the candles before. The air thickened. The symbols on the walls turned a deep pulsing red, like a heartbeat. I ran to the main doors. They slammed shut with a deafening crack. The wood strained, as if something massive was pressing from the other side. The floor shook. The ash began to spin. Faster, better, faster, until it was a black blur. From the center, something began to rise, a shape, solidifying. It was me, my height, my stance. Even the tilt of the head was the same, but the face, completely black. And within that void, two glowing red points. One of us. I stepped back, but the edge of the circle burned against my heel. The shadow reached out its hand, and my own hand moved with it. My breath quickened. My fingers trembled. It was like someone else was inside me. The camera slipped from my grip, hitting the floor lens. First, on the screen, I saw myself, standing inside the circle. But my face was gone. The shadow that had been opposite me was no longer there. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, in the center of the symbol, a faint reflection shimmered in the ash. It was looking at the camera, and the face was mine. The whisper returned, slow and certain. "You finished it." The screen flickered, and the world went black. They say the Ashwood barn still stands, hidden behind a broken fence swallowed by trees. If you find it, don't go inside, because the symbol on the floor isn't cold. It's warm, and it's still waiting. My name is Nathan Cole. I was born in a small coastal town in the Northeast, a place known for storms that seem to chew at the shore. These days, I work with the Marine Rescue Service. On the edge of this town's shore, perched on a jagged outcrop, there's an old lighthouse built in the 1890s, Lighthouse Point. According to official records, it was decommissioned in 1974. Power cut, light extinguished. But the locals still swear they've seen it shining on certain nights. Last month, the Coast Guard assigned me to investigate reports of an emergency light coming from that very lighthouse. Normally, decommissioned lights don't shine, especially not one abandoned for nearly half a century. And yet, reports were piling up from night patrols. A faint, intermittent light rotating from the top of the tower. That night, around 10:30 p.m., the sky was a blanket of heavy gray clouds. The sea was black, restless. I took a small motorboat out toward the rocks. As the waves rose, the lighthouse silhouette began to emerge through the haze. And yes, there it was. A dim but steady light turning in the top window. When I reached the dock at its base, I killed the engine. The sound of waves never broke. The front door was secured with a rusty chain, but it wasn't locked, just looped around the handle. I pushed it open. The hinges groaned. Inside, the air was thick with salt and damp. The stone walls were slick with moss, the spiral stairs narrow. The higher I climbed, the brighter the light became, sweeping in slow intervals. Someone had to be up there. On the last step, I stopped. The room was empty. Only the old Fresnel lens remained, the glass still in place, but the wiring had been stripped decades ago. And yet, when I touched the glass, light still passed through, but it wasn't coming from inside. It came from somewhere beyond the window. I stepped to the edge and looked out. Just beyond the rocks, hovering above the dark water, was a man, wearing a lighthouse keeper's uniform. In his hand, an old oil lantern. The light from it cut straight into my eyes. "Why are you still here?" I called out over the wind. No answer, but his lips moved, as if speaking soundless words. Then I realized he was speaking in Morse code. The lantern flashed short, long, short. Help. I stepped back. That's when I heard it. From the floors below. Heavy, wet footsteps, climbing the stairs. The boards groaned under the weight, coming closer. I leaned over the stairwell, but no one was there. Only darkness. And in the center of one step, 3 small drops of seawater. Suddenly the top light went out. The only illumination came from a brief flash of lightning across the sea. And in that flicker, the man outside the window was gone. The water was gone. Beyond the glass, there was nothing but a vast, lightless void. I ran down the stairs. Outside, the waves were once again normal. But at the far end of the dock, sitting on the wet planks, was a corroded lantern. I picked it up. It was cold, empty of oil. Back in town, my official report read, "Light source not located." But on my desk, even now, that lantern remains. And some nights, it glows faintly on its own. When it does, it always turns, slowly, toward the same spot out at sea, toward where a ship might once have been lost. In the heart of the Great Smoky Mountains lies a stretch of road the locals call the Road of Spirits. On the map, it's just an unmarked service route, winding through dense forest and skirting the edge of old Cherokee burial grounds. But everyone in town knows the stories. People vanish there. Cars stall without reason. Some say you can hear voices in the wind. I had been photographing fall foliage all day and decided to take a shortcut back to my motel. My GPS drew a thin, gray line that cut across the mountains. This road. The entrance was easy to miss. A narrow gap in the trees, the asphalt cracked and choked with moss. The canopy overhead closed in quickly, swallowing what little daylight remained. My headlights barely pierced the shadows, and the deeper I went, the thicker the air felt. Heavy, humid, almost electric. About 10 minutes in, the radio flickered to life. No station, no music, just static. Then, under the static, a voice. Soft, slow, speaking in a language I didn't understand. I turned the dial, but the voice stayed, threading through the noise. That's when I saw movement ahead. Figures standing along the roadside. Tall, thin, dressed in what looked like old, tattered garments. They didn't move, didn't react as my car rolled past. Each one had its head tilted slightly, as if listening. The road narrowed and the trees pressed closer. My rearview mirror caught something. Those same figures, but now they were walking, keeping pace with the car. Their feet didn't seem to touch the ground. A sharp curve came, and for a moment the road opened to a small clearing. I could see the outline of a wooden archway, standing over a path that led into the forest. Hanging from the arch were dozens of small bundles, each wrapped in cloth and tied with string. The wind stirred them gently, and a low, mournful sound rose, like 100 whispers blending into one. The figures stopped at the edge of the clearing. I didn't. I pressed the accelerator until the road spat me out onto the main highway, my chest tight, my hands gripping the wheel so hard they ached. When I finally glanced in the mirror, the road behind me was empty. But faintly, in the air vents of my car, I could still hear that voice, whispering in a language I didn't know, yet somehow understood. My name is Luke Hammond. I've hunted in these mountains my whole life. I know the seasons, the smells, the way the wind moves when snow is coming. But there's one night I can't explain, and I don't think I ever will. It was late November. The sky was the color of ash, the kind that tells you nightfall will come fast. I'd been tracking a buck all day, following its trail through Pine Ridge. By the time I found the small hunting cabin, the light was already fading. The place wasn't mine, but out here, an unlocked cabin is considered fair shelter, as long as you leave it the way you found it. Inside, the air was cold and dry. A table with 2 chairs, a stone fireplace, its ash long dead. On the wall, an old rifle hung on pegs, the wood blackened with age. I dropped my pack, lit the oil lamp, and set a pot of water to boil. Outside, the forest had gone unnervingly still. No wind, no rustle, no sound at all. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums until you start hearing your own pulse. I told myself it was nothing, just the way the cold settles at night. But then came the first knock. It wasn't on the door. It came from the back wall, low, near the floorboards. 3 slow thuds, evenly spaced. I set my mug down, listening. A minute later, the knock came again, this time higher up, behind the wall where the bed was. 3 more thuds. I grabbed my flashlight, scanning the seams in the wood, looking for gaps. Nothing. When I stepped outside, the cold hit me hard. The moon had slipped from the clouds, and the snow on the ridge caught the light. I walked around to the back of the cabin. No tracks in the frost, no sign anyone had been there. Inside again, I sat by the table, the rifle now in my lap. That's when I saw movement in the corner of my eye. Not a shadow, more like a shimmer, as if the air itself had rippled. It moved from one corner of the room to the other and vanished. The knocking started again. This time, it came from inside the wall directly behind me. 3 slow, deliberate hits. Then silence. I stood, heart pounding, and pressed my ear to the wall. A faint sound reached me, like fabric sliding over wood, and beneath it, breathing. Long, measured breaths. I stepped back, lifted the rifle, and aimed at the wall. "Who's there?" I demanded. No answer. But the breathing stopped. For the rest of the night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the table with the rifle across my knees, oil lamp burning low. Every so often, the shimmer appeared again, never in the same place twice, always moving. When morning came, the frost on the windows had patterns in it, circles and spirals, as if traced by a fingertip from the inside. I packed my gear quickly, making sure to leave the cabin as I'd found it. But as I stepped outside, I noticed something new. Fresh boot prints in the snow, starting at the cabin door and ending only a few steps away where they simply stopped. No turn, no return, just vanished. On the long walk back to town, I kept looking over my shoulder. The ridge was empty, the snow untouched. But deep inside, I knew I hadn't been alone in that cabin, and I never went back. My name is Daniel Ricks. I am a road engineer, but growing up in West Virginia taught me to listen for the stories under the roads. It was late autumn. Leaves had gone copper. Wind piled in the gutters like coal dust. The department sent me to check a suspected collapse above town, Ash Fork No. 2. On paper, it closed in 1968. Off the record, they said a shift ran short the week before the shutdown. I loaded geophones into the truck bed, helmet, boots, gas meter. By the time I reached the portal, the sun was sliding off the ridge, a concrete bulkhead with a rusted sign, "Danger, keep out." 2 nuts had clearly been loosened, old but not ancient. A cool breath slipped out from inside, the earth breathing. No methane on the meter. That at least was mercy. I worked outside first. 3 geophones in a triangle, hammer blows, clean lines on the screen. The surface looked calm. Then, far away, one metal kiss, like a car coupling. Tink, no wind. The birds had gone quiet. I lifted my lamp. Under the sign's lip, an old cord poked out, leading inward, as if someone had pulled it from the inside. "You're not going in, are you, Daniel?" The plate answered for me, a single rattle without my hand on it. Gas good, oxygen good. I looped the cord around my glove. I went in. Narrow roof, timbers dark with years of wet. Cinder crunch under my soles. Dust glittered in the beam, like gnats caught in syrup. White stenciled headings at first. A12, A13. Then the numbers stopped. Chalk names began. Billy, Hodge, E. Mercer. I paused at Mercer, not the one I'd read near Harlan. Different vein, different ghost. No date, just a name. Deeper meant colder, as if the mine refused the autumn outside. Then something slid across my lamp. Not LED glare, flame glass orange. An old miner's lamp blinked and withdrew. Hello? My voice hit the sets and came back 3 times. No reply. Only breath, not mine. I reached a split. Right-hand entry drowned in water, left hand dry. As I turned left, the dark above the sump swelled. Not eyes. The yellow shimmer behind glass. Who's there? A shift ran short. Mouth dry. Who are you? The one who keeps the book. Not old, just tired. Coal-tired. I heard a nail skate on metal, someone carving a name. I swung the light. Chalk dust lifted, fresh lines formed, then letters. Daniel. The lamp in my hand felt heavier. Don't. Meter steady. Oxygen fine. My pulse wasn't. Why me? You came in. Who ran short? A beat. Then a single name. Ephraim Pike. Archive memory flipped. 1968, Ash Fork number 2. A mismatch the final week. No body recovered, I said. No pull recorded. Mind speak. You go in, you get pulled out, they log it. No pull, the name stays on the wall. I dropped the beam. A thin line ran under my boots, not dust, machine oil, slick and faintly iridescent. I followed the rings, not to the dry left, but to the flooded right. I can't go there, I said. Water. The lamp trembled on the surface like a no. Then it pointed, somehow, elsewhere. A roof set with a faint chalk arrow. Up. I climbed onto the cap, rapped the raw stone. It answered with that hollow, tomb-thick note. Are you here? The shift must be completed. How? Write me out. I wish I could say I bolted, but my hands had already found my field book. E. Pike. Out. As I wrote, the entry sighed. A single drop from the roof, water or something else, hit my shoulder. I raised the beam. The flame glass was gone. No yellow, no shimmer, only small bubbles drowsing in the sump. On the way back, I looked once more at the names. Billy, Hodge, E. Mercer, and now, in fresher dust, Daniel. I drew a dot after my name. Period. Done. Outside, the ridge exhaled as the sun slid away. I pulled the geophones, braced the plate, tightened the rusted nuts, best I could. At the truck door, the mine sent one tink, a coupler's little protest, then silence. In the report I wrote, Ash Fork number 2, surface stable, interior entry at risk from inundation, secure portal, reconcile ledger with archives. That was the government voice. In my field book I added, shift completed, E. Pike recorded out. That night at home my old pencil rolled on the desk. Before it fell, something stopped it. A thin ring of oil spread on the wood like moonlight. I smelled iron, threaded with coal. I cracked the window. One wind came down from the mountain, leaving a memory as plain as a whistle at shift change. I killed the light. And in the dark I told myself, sometimes writing a name out is how you send someone home. That night, the wind tapping against my window carried that familiar coal scent from the mountains. I couldn't sleep. It was as if that sentence had climbed out of the notebook still lying on my desk, wandering around the room, whispering itself again and again. By early morning, I was on the road. Inside me, there was a pull I couldn't explain, like something calling me to another place, another story. The road curled north along the valley, and the fog thickened with every bend. On the map, the place was marked as Hollow Drift, but locals called it the Empty Hollow. Old geology reports described frozen groundwater, sunken earth, collapsed homes. But some said what was buried there wasn't just earth. It was time. At the entrance to town, a single-story shop caught my eye. Above its door hung a blackened gas lamp. Inside, an old man was fiddling with a palm-sized radio. I asked him the way to Hollow Drift. Without looking up, he said, "There? Best be back before winter comes." Then, still not meeting my eyes, he added, "The wind there only blows one way, but it doesn't follow the same road back." When I reached the mouth of the hollow, I found a street lined with abandoned houses. Roofs sagged under the weight of snow, though it wasn't winter. This was a cold that seemed to rise from beneath the ground. Ice hung from broken windows, dripping into silence. My footsteps echoed on the wooden boardwalks until I saw it. A rusty miner's helmet lying in front of a doorway. Inside, the cracked glass of a headlamp still cradled an unburned wick. I picked it up. The moment my fingers closed around the helmet, I heard a faint metallic sound from inside the house, the slow give and pull of chains. The door creaked open under my hand. Inside, the air was damp, smelling of rot and cold stone, and in the center of the room stood a table, half buried in a layer of frozen ground. On the tabletop lay a ledger. The cover read, "Shift Log, Hollow Drift." The pages near the front were dark and brittle, edges crumbling. But in the middle there were fresh sheets. And at the very top, a name written in shaky hand, Peter Hale. Beneath it, separated by a faint pencil line, was an empty space. Above that space, a damp gray fingerprint. When I touched it, a bitter cold spread through my palm. Then a drop fell from the ceiling. But it wasn't water. It smelled metallic. I stepped back, and from the far corner of the room, a voice rose. "Write me, too." The sound was muffled, deep, like it was speaking from inside the wooden walls. I swung the weak lamplight toward the corner. No one stood there. But between the shadows, a figure emerged. A miner's helmet on his head, a face swallowed in darkness, a rusted hammer in his hand. He moved toward me. I couldn't hear his steps, but the thin ice on the floor cracked beneath him. When he stopped in front of me, the faint yellow glow from his helmet lamp fell across the ledger's empty line. For a moment, I saw my own name there. "Who?" I whispered. "The one who finishes the ledger," he said. "The empty line is a debt line. Write it, and it's over." My fingers were numb, but I took the pencil. I hesitated. Then, beneath Peter Hale's name, I wrote a single word: unknown. The air in the room sank like a held breath being released. The figure stepped back. The ice cracked. And under the table, a hollow space rumbled like a deep, turning wheel. I slammed the ledger shut, left the helmet and lamp where I'd found them, and stepped out into the cold street. The wind had changed direction. When I reached the edge of town, the old man's shop was closed. But on the door, a miner's helmet hung. Inside it, the same page from the ledger. My handwriting, my word. That's when I understood. Some debts don't care whose name is written. Only that the empty line is closed. I heard the story about the Ash Fork mine a week ago. How writing a name out could send someone home. I didn't know if it was true. But it came back to me this morning, standing by the edge of Hollow Bridge. The county sent me here after the last spring storm. They said the old wooden span might have shifted on its footings. I've been an inspector for 15 years, but I've never liked this bridge. Too quiet. Too far from anyone who might hear you call out. The drive-in was slick from yesterday's rain. The road dropped into the valley like a tunnel of green, the air heavy with the smell of wet soil. Not a bird, not a single branch moving in the wind. Hollow Bridge came into view all at once. Dark timber, sagging under its own weight. Iron bolts scabbed with rust. And right in the middle of the span, a sign, a round steel plate, half choked with moss. It looked blank until the light hit at the right angle. One word had been carved into it: don't. I stepped onto the first plank. Underneath, the creek bed was bone dry, scattered with gray stones. Yet from somewhere below came a steady, deliberate knock. Tock, tock, tock. I froze. The knocking stopped. A whisper drifted up between the planks. "Don't cross!" I scanned the banks. Nothing. Still, the hairs on my arms rose. My pen shifted inside my shirt pocket. When I pulled it out, the tip quivered, as if pulled by something unseen. That's when I noticed fresh grooves in the rail, letters slowly cutting themselves into the wood. They spelled my name. I took a step back. "Stop!" I said aloud, my voice carrying into the empty valley. The grooves shivered, then blurred into a single word. "Go!" I didn't want to, but my boots were already taking me to the center. When I glanced back, the metal sign was gone. The knocking returned, faster now. Tock, 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 tock. I told myself I'd have to check below for loose supports. I tied my rope to a beam, lowered myself into the dry creek bed. The sound cut off. A cool breath seemed to move past my ear. There, under a large stone, I found a rusted miner's helmet, empty, except for a thin drip of water from its rim. On the stone beneath it, someone had carved, "Those who leave their name on the bridge never return." I let the helmet fall. When I climbed back up, the rail now read, "Stay." Mist rose from the empty creek, curling around my legs, making it hard to move. I forced myself through it, reaching the far side in a rush. As soon as my boots touched asphalt, the gurgling and groaning timbers went still. I looked back once. The bridge was just there. No sign, no names, like nothing had happened. In the truck, I pulled my pen from my pocket. The tip was wet, not with ink, but with something that smelled faintly of rust. In my official report, I wrote, "Hollow bridge, structurally unstable, recommend immediate closure." But in my own notebook, underlined twice. A bridge isn't always a road. Sometimes it's a line you're not meant to cross. My name is Daniel Ricks. By trade, I know the roads. But sometimes, the roads take you to places you were never meant to know. That night, the snowstorm pushed me straight into one of those places. I work for the State Highways Department. In winter, the mountain passes are my responsibility. That day, the weather report spoke of a brutal storm closing in on Ash Fork Pass. I drove the salt truck, wind turning the snowflakes in my headlights into a blinding white curtain. It was close to midnight. Warnings from the radio, blizzard, zero visibility, chains required, blurred into the background hum. Rounding a bend, my front wheels sank deep into the snow. I pressed the gas, but the chains spun uselessly. I killed the engine. Silence thickened instantly. Even the sound of snow hitting the windshield seemed heavier. I shut off the lights. And in the dark, on my right, I saw a silhouette. An old, wooden cabin. I trudged toward the door. Each step sank deep into the drifts, my breath clouding back into my face. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. Inside, it was freezing, but the wind was gone. A rusty stove in one corner. Along the far wall, shelves lined with dusty cans, broken glass jars, and in the center, on a table, one single object, a grease-stained ledger. Embossed on the cover were the words, "Pass Records." I flipped through the pages, dates, names, and notes beside them. January 8, 1985, J. Callahan, did not pass. February 14, 1992, M. Yates, never returned. December 27, 2004, T. Phelps, last seen. Some entries had thin red lines drawn beside them. I picked up the pen to write my name, then froze. There was no wind, yet the rafters above gave a faint creak. A low hum spread through the cabin, distant, like a truck engine far away, or slow, heavy breathing. I moved to the window. Outside, the blizzard still raged. But in the heart of the white storm, directly opposite the cabin, a faint beam of light moved, sweeping, as if someone were searching with a flashlight. But there was no road there. I cracked the door. Cold rushed in. I stepped outside, snow up to my knees. The light wasn't coming toward me. It was drifting, slowly, toward the cabin. That old instinct stirred inside me, the one that says, go back. I shut the door, sat down by the stove, though it was empty of wood. Then the pages of the ledger began to turn, on their own, fast, erratic, without a breath of wind. They stopped on a blank page. One single word appeared in pencil. Stay. I swallowed hard. Who's writing this? I asked, my voice cracking. No answer. But from one corner of the cabin, footprints began to appear in the snow tracked across the floorboards. First damp patches, then drops of melted ice, then the sound of footsteps. No one was there, but the prints moved toward the table and stopped in front of the ledger. The pen rolled across the table came to rest on the page. Nothing else moved. Yet the pen lowered, drew a line, then a letter, another, D-A-N-I-E-L. I stepped back. My heart slammed in my chest. No, I said, this isn't my story. But the pen didn't stop. Beside my name, just like the others, it wrote a date, today. From inside the stove, as if someone had opened a bellows, a wave of hot air rose. The door behind me clicked shut and locked. Outside, the storm still howled, but now another sound joined it. Heavy, rhythmic. Footsteps. Coming closer. To the cabin. I shoved the ledger into my pocket and ran to the window. Through the white fury, I saw a dark figure, walking without a light. It raised its head. I couldn't see a face, because there was none. I grabbed the iron poker by the stove, turned toward the door. The shadow was at the threshold. And then, the storm went silent. The wind died. Without thinking, I yanked open the stove door and threw the ledger inside. Flames leapt instantly, flooding the cabin in orange. The figure stepped back, then vanished into the snow. The door eased open again. I stepped out. The storm was gone, the sky clear, the moon lighting the pass. My truck waited just ahead, as if it had never been stuck at all. I turned to look back, but the cabin was gone. Only a snow-covered clearing remained, and in the center, half-burned paper, blackened letters still visible. Stay! I climbed into the truck. The engine started. I drove on, and I reminded myself of the lesson I learned the night before at Ash Fork number 2. Sometimes, not writing a name is the only way to send it home.